Well, hello, everyone. Happy Friday. We have got an absolute doozy of a happy hour this week. This is no joke. So the other day, I've been emailing back and forth with a whistleblower that works at this market research company that's supposed to be like non-partisan. And he said, Carlin, they're bringing Ibram X Kendi to do a training. And I said, can you send me a recording of that training? And as it turns out, it actually wasn't even very hard to get a recording of the training because they uploaded to their YouTube channel. They put this training on their YouTube channel as an unlisted video. So all the guy had to do was literally send me a link to his YouTube or to the company's YouTube channel. And of course, because I never trust that these companies are going to keep anything public, I immediately downloaded the training, which worked out well because the company has since made the training private. So, what we are going to watch today is going to be a corporate training that Ibram X Kendi did 3 days ago. So, what we're going to see is his most up to date material that he presents in a corporate setting for which he is paid probably at least $25,000 for, maybe more, but probably at least $25,000 for the talk we're about to watch. And we're going to see what he says when he thinks no one's looking, when he thinks it's just a private corporate training. We're not making it public. That's what we're going to be watching today. I'm really excited. The only thing we've ever watched from Ibram Kendi before is actually it's like we watched an older video of him, right? Oh, I didn't mean to do that where you guys can see it. We did watch an older video of him from back in the day, but we have not watched a new one as of recently. So I'm really excited. Now we do have a couple quick orders of business before we jump into the training, however. Now, first order of business is that, hey God, hey God, I was not responsible with all my tabs. First order of business is that you have to download your Unwoke bingo card. The link is in the description below. Everyone's bingo card is unique. You follow the link, you generate your card, you get an Unwoke bingo card, you get a free square in the middle. Then we go for lines or we go for corners. If you get a bingo, which I would say that there is a good sporting bet, someone's going to get a bingo today. You call out bingo in the chat. You don't win a dang thing, but it's something to kind of keep us paying attention, make sure we're not falling asleep, that sort of stuff. Now, once we get a bingo, then we go for blackout bingo. No one's gotten blackout bingo yet that I know of. So make sure that you're really paying attention today because it could be a really great day for blackout bingo. That's thing number one we have to talk about. Thing number two we have to talk about is locals, because of course YouTube are some censoring mother effers if there ever was one. I've already gotten 2 wrongful strikes on my YouTube channel in the last couple months. So the very best thing you can do if you want to support my work is to make sure that you are a member in my locals community. Now, locals is free to join if you just want to check out the community, see what's going on in there, get on my mailing list in case I ever get banned off YouTube. You can do that. But what would really help me out is if you could become a supporter and support the work I'm doing. Listen, guys, like YouTube, to be quite frank, does not pay enough for me to, be able to do this as a full-time thing. So I really do actually rely on locals to make up the difference. My locals community is what allows me to be independent. It's what allows me to spend time talking to whistleblowers. It's what allows me to spend time reviewing documentations, all that good stuff. Because if I don't have the resources to do it, I'm gonna have to go do corporate training more than I really want to. And that would, of course, take my time away from working with all of you. So I love what I do with you guys. I love my locals community, and it is the thing that keeps me independent. I do that because you guys can support me into the community and unlock a lot of awesome perks that come with that. Support comes at $5 a month, or you can give more if you want to, but you're under no obligation. It can come at $50 a year, which gives you 2 months for free. You can make a one-time gift. And some of the perks you're going to receive when you become a supporter is you're going to get 2 Zoom calls a week with me that usually, guys, I spend at least 6 hours per week on Zoom with my locals. So we talk about all sorts of things. It's not just me yammering all the time. I actually listen to you guys much more than I talk, and we connect as a community. We talk about what's on our mind. People use it as a support group. It's really, really awesome. So you're going to get those 2 Zoom calls a week. You're going to get craft and bitches. You're going to get book clubs. You're going to get debate clubs. And a new thing that I'm launching in locals is I am going to be bringing special guests into the community just to have one-on-one time with my supporters. So you're going to get to talk to these people that you see on all the big shows. On October 12th, we're going to have Eliza Blue come into our community. She's going to be in our community Zoom call, and she's going to answer your questions about the work that she does with human trafficking, her experiences. She's going to be able to say all the things that she doesn't say on YouTube. These conversations are not going to be recorded. They're just going to be private conversations with the group. And then at the end of October, we're going to have the voice of reason, Benjamin Boyce himself, joining us. So there has never been a better time to become a member of my locals. Get into all sorts of awesome stuff. I try to do as much as I can for you guys in my locals, and definitely it really helps me out. Oh my God, tune in, drop out. I already have a great super chat. Thank you for this. On a recent Benjamin Boyce podcast, I asked James Lindsay about the phrase anti-white, and he mentioned you. Yeah, James Lindsay and I are talking about this. He agreed with your analysis regarding white identitarians attempting to co-opt the anti-CRT movement, but he did say that CRT does scapegoat whiteness. Thoughts? James Lindsay and I, hang on, let me do this. James Lindsay and I are in, we have been talking about this privately. So, and we've been talking about it privately for a really long time. We are in complete alignment on what the problem is. We agree completely on what the problem is. We disagree on what the solution is. And his contention is going to be that we need to get better at using the anti-white language than the white identitarians. My contention is that we can just use different language, and that's a lot more easy. I also, to be really frank, and I would say this to James's face as well, I have spent significantly more time looking into this particular topic than he has. So James Lindsay is smarter than me on many, 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 many topics. He's not smarter than me on this. I'm sorry. He's not. I have spent significantly more time looking into this and how it's actually impacting the whole situation. So you can take advice from whoever you want. I think it's pretty easy just to use a different term. I don't think it's that hard. And if you continue to, if people, and I'm going to be very blunt about this, I do not allow that language on my channel. If you make the conscious choice to speak in language that is being proactively used by white identitarians, I'm going to make the assumption that you are a white identitarian and that you are trying to insert their language, and I'm going to block you. That's my position. It's not changing. Sorry. And I'm really not going to talk about that much today because I did an entire stream on it a week ago. When Kieran is back, because Kieran is not feeling well, he and I are going to do a second stream on it. We can talk about it more then. But again, just to recap, James Lindsay and I are in complete agreement on what the problem is. We disagree on the solution. And this is a topic I've spent much more time on than he has. So you all have to make your choices about which way you want to go on the solution piece. But if you come on my channel and you use the anti-white language, you're going to get blocked immediately. There are going to be no questions asked, and you have all been warned about 5,000 times. And if you don't understand why yet, you know, that's on you. That's on you. All right, guys, let's see. What else do we have? Oh, I actually have a little teaser, though, to get us started. I have a teaser that I want to go over real quick because I have to share a different screen. In addition to the presentation we're going to watch today, I also might have their internal anti-racism documents that the company is giving to their employee. So you can see this is Ipsos. This is the same company who did the training that we're going to watch. This is their allyship checklist. So let's go through this allyship checklist before we start. That is completely separate from the issue. That has literally nothing to do with what we're talking about. And if you don't understand why, I'm sorry, guys, I'm going to start becoming quite a bitch on this topic. I really am. If you don't understand why, go watch the stream I did last Wednesday. Go read the article that we spent 3 weeks writing on the topic. And then you can come and have an opinion. but I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not. I'm absolutely not. Go do your fucking homework. Because right now we're going to talk about this allyship checklist. At Ipsos, we strive to foster a diverse and inclusive working environment that brings our teams and people together while supporting everyone individually. We can use this checklist during our day-to-day collaborations across the organization and client engagement to ensure we are meeting our collective goal of being anti-racist. Number 1, be a champion for change. Always remember the human in the process. Continually educate myself on anti-racism. Show yourself some grace. Take action when something doesn't feel right. Find ways to advocate and amplify. Step 2, understanding key principles of allyship. So the reason I'm reading this is I just want to make sure that we're all doing all these steps today as we watch this video from Kendi's corporate training from 3 days ago. Okay. Introspection. Okay. If you want to understand why I'm not using that term, what you need to do is go watch the material from last week and read the article. That is not the correct term to use. That's why I'm not using it. You guys have got to do. I'm sorry, guys. If you keep coming back to this topic, I'm sorry. Go do the fucking work. I spent weeks putting this material together for you guys. Every single time these questions are answered in the material. Go watch the material from last week. Jesus Christ. I swear to God, guys, we are focusing. This is actually a really exciting day. Focus on the topic. My God. Step 2, understand key principles of allyship. Introspection, recognize the benefits of individual privileges because of systemic inequality and to use the knowledge to advocate for those who do not have the same privileges. Being comfortable with being uncomfortable. Acknowledge and be willing to face the discomfort of having difficult conversations to build a more equitable and just community in the long run. 3, listen to understand. Center the conversations on the people most impacted by allowing space for voices that are not heard as much as others so that we can hear, validate, and understand others' experiences, especially when different from our own. Different perspectives connect with other allies for guidance and learning opportunities by being afraid to ask other allies questions and passing no judgment on others asking questions as a part of their own allyship work. Be proactive and accountable. Understand that our education on bias, prejudice, and structural inequality is up to us and no one else. Being an ally is an ongoing process of learning. And then they have this entire allyship checklist. Now, after we watch this presentation from Ibram X Kendi, we should be able to demonstrate the knowledge and awareness of the issues of racism, be prepared to continually educate ourselves about racism and multicultural issues, realize it's not about me, avoid personalizing racial issues in conversations, identify racism as it's happening at meetings and during client engagements, make sure anti-racism is part of the discussion. Oh, really, Ipsos? Oh, really? Because it's my understanding that you're supposed to be a nonpartisan organization. It's my understanding that you are supposed to be a nonpartisan organization. So then why exactly are we talking about infusing anti-racism discussions into your client work? Why are you pushing anti-racism into your client work? That seems a little that doesn't seem nonpartisan to me. That seems incredibly partisan. Strategize and work in coalitions with diverse others to advance anti-racist work. Attend to group dynamics to invite and include people of color. Validate the comments and actions of people in color and other allies, but not paternalistically. Very important. And so on and so forth. So we've got that whole allyship document. I'll be making this available to members of my locals community, and so you guys can see the full PDF. But for right now, are you guys ready to get into the presentation? Are we ready? to watch Ibram X Kendi's keynote from 3 days ago. Let me just get it up. All right. Now, of course, we have one final order of business, and that's because since this is happy hour, I'm going to be drinking because I don't drink much, but I do drink during happy hour. I have 2 options for beers today. You guys are going to help me pick which one. Now, these might look, so you guys know I've usually been drinking pumpkin lately, and I do have pumpkin again, but this time I have pumpkin nitro in the can, or I have cold brew coffee pumpkin nitro. Because if you see nitro, nitro is always better when it comes to beer. Nitro is almost always better than like just normal beer. So if you ever see nitro beer on tap, like you always want to get the beer that's on nitro. It just tastes better, it tastes creamier, it has more flavor. Like Founder's Breakfast Stout is a really good example of this. Like if you get Founder's Breakfast Stout in the bottle, it's all right. It's not a bad beer. If you get Founder's Breakfast Stout on nitro at a bar, holy shit, it's the best beer ever. So I have 2, and they sometimes do these nitro cans too, which aren't quite as good as what you get at the bar, but they're still pretty good. So I think I want to start with the coffee one just because I haven't had this one before. But then I do have the regular pumpkin nitro for if I don't like the coffee one or if I just want to change it up. And so we're going to go with that. Ken asks, can we call him by his real name? No. No. And the reason I say no is because I think it's a cheap shot, and I think that people should be able to use whatever name they want. That's the name he wants to go by. I'm gonna provide him that basic respect and courtesy. I don't think anything is won by calling him a name he doesn't want to be called by. Like you get 0 points. And I think we need to stop going for the cheap shot because the cheap shot literally wins us nothing. All right. I'm going to go with the pumpkin cold brew. Let's see. Show you this, guys, as it pours in. Oh, look how pretty it is. Look how pretty it is. So you can see it's settling just like a Guinness. So pretty. Ooh, nice. It looks like an Oktoberfest, doesn't it? Mmm. Oh, it's so creamy and so good. It's so good. Okay. Oh, that was a good choice. If you guys can find this, usually you can only find these at like craft beer stores. But if you can find Southern Tier's nitros that they put out, man, everything Southern Tier does is good. All right, guys, let's kick this into high gear. Let's get this party started. Get your bingo cards ready. Let's watch this training that Ibram Kendi did 3 days ago to Ipsos's like internal professional development, whatever. Let's get started.
Well, welcome everyone to our bridge presentation here. We have as a very special guest today, Dr. Ibram X Kendi. And I want to jump right into who he is and start asking him some very important questions because there is so much that I know I personally want to cover, but I know there'll be some questions at the end for him as well. So let me just tell you who he is. Dr. Kendi is a #1 New York Times best-selling and National Book Award-winning author. He's the Andrew W. Mellon Professor in the Humanities at Boston University and the founding director of the BU Center for Antiracist Research. Dr. Kendi is the
Just as an aside, I am an alumni of BU. I went to BU. I graduated in 2003. I went to the College of Communication at BU. I'm pretty pissed that my alma mater is supporting this jackass. And Boston University will be getting not a single other donation from me if they can give this guy $20 million to start a center where he's literally just grifting. He also was just awarded, if you guys didn't hear, Ibram X Kendi was also just named a MacArthur Genius, which came with a grant of like $625,000. Let's see what that $625,000 pays for.
Author of Stamped from the Beginning, which is a definitive history of racist ideas in America, which won the National Book Award for Nonfiction. And the
So Benjamin in the chat says, I understand it doesn't take a lot of sales to top the New York Times bestseller list. Well, not even that, Benjamin, but it's the New York Times bestseller list is not about how many books you sell. The New York Times will specifically conspire to keep books it doesn't like off of their bestseller list, even if they sold the most books. They did this with Cynical Theories. Cynical Theories rightfully should have been on the New York Times bestseller list. It wasn't because the New York Times specifically made the decision to take it off. Also, within their list, they will make decisions about who ranks where. So the New York Times bestseller list has absolutely nothing to do with who sold the most books. It's all about playing the New York Times' little game. I mean, ask Dave Rubin if you ever get the chance. He'll tell you about this.
Black Campus Movement, which won the W.E.B. Du Bois Book Prize. He's also the author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, How to Be an Antiracist, and Stamped, Racism, Antiracism, and You, a young adult remix of Stamped from the Beginning, which he co-authored with Jason Reynolds. He most recently authored the #1 indie bestseller, Antiracist Baby, available as a book board and a picture board for caretakers and little ones. Dr. Kendi, alongside the award-winning historian Dr. Keisha N. Blaine, edited the upcoming 400 Souls, which I can't wait to see. Which is a choral history of African Americans covering 400 years in the voices of 90 writers. Dr. Kendi is a contributing writer at The Atlantic and a CBS News correspondent. He's published numerous essays in periodicals, including the New York Times, the Washington Post.
In other words, the grift is strong with this one. The grift is very, 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 very strong with this one. If you guys are focusing in the chat, because I'm seeing lots in the chat about people talking about his name, if what you're focusing on is the fact that he changed his name, you're focusing on the wrong things. The fact that Ibram Kendi changed his name is the very least of our worries in this entire affair. Guys, I honestly, you've got to keep your eye on the damn prize. You really do. I'm going to start getting really militant about this, because what I found is that people get distracted very easily by things that don't matter. And when you get distracted easily by things that don't matter, no one tells you to cut that shit out because you're actually distracting from things that do matter. Every single time the focus is on Ibram X Kendi's name, we are not focusing on things that matter significantly more than Ibram X Kendi's name. So please focus. Thank you.
Post, Time, the Huffington Post, and The Root. Dr. Kendi has received research fellowships, grants, and visiting appointments from a variety of universities, foundations, professional associations, and libraries, including the American Historical Association, the Library of Congress, National Academy of Education, the Lyndon B. Johnson Library and Museum, the Rutgers Center for Historical Analysis, Brown University, Princeton University, Duke University, the University of Chicago, and UCLA. He was a 2019 Guggenheim Fellow, and he will also become the 2021 Francis B. Cashin Fellow at the Radcliffe Institute for the Advanced Study at Harvard University. And I am proud to announce that as of yesterday, yes, he is the winner of the prestigious Genius Grant, which recognizes exceptional creativity as well as future potential across the arts, sciences, humanities, advocacy, and other fields. Whew! You go, Dr. Kendi.
$625,000.
I thought, my goodness, it's going to take me so long just to read his bio. We got to get to the good stuff too.
I'm sorry.
No, that's all good stuff. I'm kidding. But it's an amazing amount of accomplishment that you have had. And we are just so honored and so happy to have you here to talk to us about, racism, specifically anti-racism, and kind of help us through our journey, because we've been on this one for a little bit now. It started last summer, and we're trying to move on and move forward. So we think your perspective could be very, very helpful.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Given that, Yeah, I just want to ground you a little bit in what we have done so that you can understand sort of the context of what, how you're answering some of my questions for you. We have been asked to do a lot of research from clients in the business world in all kinds of categories. And from that, we had developed some framework around racism and how that works. We had to define it for ourselves.
So I
And
just want to stop here and point this out. Like how they're defining racism at the very beginning of this discussion is people with black asterisk, all members of the black and brown community, regardless of gender, geographic location, and economic status. That doesn't, they're not including like Asian people in that, but okay. People with black skin are at best inferior to white people and at worst subhuman. To this day, we bear the deep bruises and shock of its consequences. These people are literally the only ones who think that black people are inferior or subpar to white people. This is in all their books. They're the ones that are perpetuating this. They're the ones that are pushing this lie. Robin DiAngelo talks about this. Kendi talks about this. Everyone talks about this, like from the anti-racist side, that black people are at best inferior to white people. No one thinks that except these people.
then we had to develop a way to kind of look at ways to do better within Ipsos as we did that. So that's the journey we've been on. This is how we have defined racism. Basically,
So this is how Ipsos, the non-partisan market research company, has defined racism. I mean, Kendi might disagree with this. This is not how Kendi defines racism, so we'll see.
that it's founded in a lie, right? That
Now, don't get me wrong. Kendi believes that this is true, but like this is not. Kendi defines racism as in terms of racial disparities. So anytime there's a racial disparity between groups, he'll say that that's a result of systemic racism. So, for example, African Americans have gotten the vaccine at a significantly lower rate than white people. So, according to Kendi's definition of racism, that African Americans getting the vaccine at a lower rate is an example of systemic racism. I don't make the rules, Kendi does. But I'm going to be interested to see what he says about this definition.
people with dark black skin are at best inferior to white people and at worst subhuman. That's how we defined it. And to this day, we still bear the brunt of the deep bruises that this has caused. So given that, we also mapped out, again, a bit of a framework that we've been working from, where we started with this lie at the center, and then we sort of looked at that.
Why is a market research company doing this? Serious question. Why is a company that is dedicated to market research mapping out frameworks to deal with racism? Does that seem confusing to anyone else? Because I've worked for I worked for a market research company for higher education specifically. I was their leadership content director. I also did marketing for them before I moved into that. Why is a market research company mapping out frameworks to solve racism? Let's see what they said. Up at the top here, if you can't see, the framework of a lie, a timeless deceit created with deliberate monetary intent, has been integrated into organized consciousness and unconscious daily existence of cultures around the world. That sounds a little bit like what Kendi's doing, doesn't it? Doesn't it seem as though Kendi has created a single timeless deceit created with deliberate monetary intent, which has been integrated into organized, conscious, and unconscious daily existence of cultures around the world? Oh, look, they categorize the Proud Boys as racist, even though the Proud Boys, well, I'm actually not sure if he's their leader now. I'm not sure what's going on there, but they probably, think Enrique Tarrio is still the leader. I don't know. Purposeful systems designed for the advantage of some, usually for economic purposes like slavery, redlining, prison systems, and lending policies. Systems built without the acknowledgement/consideration of bias, like machine learning, educational testing, lack of diversity, and legacy privileges. Racist beliefs and attitude in organizations created to justify systemic practices and consequences. The KKK, the Proud Boys, racist beliefs and white supremacists. Dude, let me tell you guys what. After spending weeks researching the anti-white nonsense with the white positivity movement, can I just tell you guys how ridiculous some of the things look that these people call racism? These people will ignore directly the white positivity movement that they have been stroking the flames of for years and years and years. They will ignore it directly. That movement is doing things that are way worse than anything that these people are going to talk about. I promise you, but they ignore it purposefully. They do not care. If you take nothing else away from this stream, what I want you to take away is this. The woke left does not care about fighting racism. They only care about using racism as a political weapon. If you give them a chance to actually fight racism, they'll say, nah, not interested. They won't even talk about it, but they'll go on and on and on and on and on and on and on about the Proud Boys ad nauseum, infinitely. It's so ridiculous. What is the white positivity movement? You're going to want to refer to the stream that I did last Wednesday and the article in the description of that stream, and you will find out all about it. We're not talking about it today, but I did a whole thing on it last week. All right. The last thing says subtle divisions and reinforce of privilege, unconscious bias, inappropriate references. Oh my God. Cultural exclusion, non-factual assumptions.
Across a couple of axes, right? So sometimes the lie is embedded in our systems. Sometimes it's very behavioral. Sometimes that lie is very conscious, and sometimes it's unconscious. And we looked at all four of those buckets, and as a result of that, we tried to figure out what could be done within each of those. And based on that, we have pillars that we have developed around how to do better at it.
Yeah, see, I heard this and then I heard other things. So I've heard numerous stories from like different people about what's going on. I personally don't really care. It's not my business, it's not my club. But they're still not racist. Like, they may be a bunch of raging idiots, but they're not racist. I'm sorry, they're not.
Ipsos. So that's kind of where we're starting from, is this framework that kind of looks at whether it's, conscious or not, and systemic or behavioral. And I'd love to start then with you around, let's just go back to the very beginning. Let's talk about this word racism, because it is so loaded, right?
Yes,
And I
yes,
think
Ibram,
people
let's talk about the
get
word
afraid of
racism.
it. I
Let's
think
do it.
people get sensitive around it.
Let's
They get
do it.
defensive around it. But I'd just love to hear your perspective about racism, what that is, and by the way, anti-racism and what that is.
Sure. And so I think that, well, let me just sort of say this. First, I'm excited to be in conversation with you, April, and I'm glad we're able to have this.
How much do you want to bet that Ibram Kendi will cry at some point during this conversation? Because he kind of already looks like he's going to cry.
This event, and one of the things I'm trying to get people to recognize is, and to understand, is to see racism is almost like a disease.
Ah, so okay. I'm literally a mixed race bisexual Proud Boy in the Seattle chapter. I cannot test that we suck at racism. Yeah, you guys suck at racism. You really do. I like all the Proud Boys I've met. I have never met a racist Proud Boy.
And what that means is that it is something that is not inherent to the earth. It's not inherent to humankind. It's not inherent to the human consciousness. It's structural, but that doesn't mean it can't be deconstructed. People hold racist ideas, but that doesn't mean they were born with those ideas. there was a time before the onset of the modern world that people did not conceive of and divide people by races. This is a new phenomenon. It's actually, a cancer that we've caught sort of fairly early. But then there are also skilled individuals who have the capacity to diagnose and treat. And then we should also understand that just like with any sort of disease, the treatment is likely not going to be comfortable, right? And so I think you have people who imagine that we can heal diseases, something like a metastatic racism, in a comfortable fashion. But going back to sort of the core, I think it's to really understand racism is to understand the relationship between policies, ideas, and the outcome and the normalization. In other words, racism is a powerful collection of policies that lead to racial inequities.
Racism, here's Kendi's definition of racism. Racism is a collection of policies that lead to inequities. Kind of like vaccine mandates, which has led to the racial inequity of African Americans being vaccinated and therefore having less access to resources and services and restaurants and activities than they otherwise would have had than white people, because African Americans are vaccinated at a significantly lower rate than the white population. So vaccine mandates and vaccine passports would be considered an example of systemic racism under Ibram Kendi's definition, which is a set of policies that lead to racial disparities. Anytime there is a racial disparity, Kendi is going to say that it's a result of racism.
And are substantiated by ideas of racial hierarchy. And anti-racism is the very opposite, creating a structure, a powerful collection of policies that can lead to equity and are substantiated by ideas of.
So he just said being an anti-racist is about instituting policies that lead to equity. Now, pop quiz for the chat. Let's see how much you guys have been paying attention. What is the problem with making the goal about instituting policies that lead to equity? Why might that be a really bad idea? This is like an easy one, guys. This is like a gimme. I know you know the answer to this. Why is instituting policies that would lead to equity a really bad idea? Alexandra says, equity is an economic term. In theory, we're founded mostly on merit-based policy, which is equality, not equity. Andrew says, equity equals Marxism. Giorgio says, equity is about forced outcomes. M169 says, no such thing as equal outcomes. Well, you can. I mean, you can put policies in place to try to create equal outcomes, but you're going to have a problem. Because when you focus on creating policies that are all about creating equal outcomes, what happens? Well, okay, let me give you guys an example. If we focus, let's say, so an example of equal outcomes would be every single student gets the same grade in the class. Every single student gets the same grade, regardless. That's equal outcomes. If students got different grades, that would be inequitable outcomes, right? The only way to achieve equity in terms of your outcomes in school is everyone gets the same grade in the class. How do you make it so that everyone gets the same grade? You have to take the exceptional students and dumb them down to mediocre levels. You can never push all people to the highest level. When you're doing that, you don't leave opportunity for genius. You don't leave opportunity for excellence. In an equitable society, there is no such thing as excellence because everyone has to be the same. Yeah, his bookshelf is pretty racist, I think. It's also very white. His bookshelf is practicing whiteness.
Of racial equality.
Yeah. So I mean, I will tell you that even here at Ipsos, and we tend to be a fairly liberal organization just because.
Oh, Ipsos tends to be a fairly liberal organization because I was under the impression that Ipsos was a nonpartisan organization. Interesting.
we're pollers, right? So we try to get as much truth from what people are feeling as possible. But I will say there's still people that kind of question, is racism really still alive? Is that still something that we're dealing with? And I think the George Floyd thing, his murder certainly raised a whole lot of issues and brought that to the surface. But I just love your perspective on, is it still here, and are we still dealing with it, or has this just been overblown?
Any serious conversation.
Watch as Kendi answers this question, because he is not going to give an example of how racism exists. He will not give a concrete example. He's gonna if you think that Kendi is speaking in word salad in answering this question, I want to see some salad emojis in the chat. Kendi's not going to give an example of how racism still exists. He's just going to talk in generalities. Let's watch.
Conversation about the existence of racism or lack thereof has to begin with racial disparities and inequities. So, in other words, do we live in a society where Black, brown, and indigenous people are disproportionately poor? Do we live in a society where certain racial groups are more likely to be incarcerated, are more likely to have wealth, are more likely to be in highly selective colleges and universities?
Do we live in a society where some racial groups are far less likely to be vaccinated than other racial groups?
Are less likely to be killed by police, are more likely to die while giving birth, are more likely to die as an infant? Do we live in that type of society of racial inequities and disparities? And my answer to that is yes. So then the question becomes, why do those racial disparities exist? Why is it that
Okay, Ibram, let's hear an example of systemic racism. I want a specific policy. If being an anti-racist is about implementing policy that would reduce racial disparities, I want to hear an example of one specific policy that is currently in place that you would like to get rid of that would lead to reduced racial disparities. Let's hear it, Ibram. I want an example, concrete.
uh, Black pregnant women are 3 times more likely to die in pregnancy or pregnancy-related causes, than white women. And why does that disparity grow as the income of those women grow? And there's only 2 causes of disparities. There's only 2 causes that explain, for instance, why white people have 10 times the median wealth in this country as Black people. Either it's because there's something wrong with Black people, with those Black women, with Black poor people, with Black people who are incarcerated, or there's something wrong with our society, or there's something wrong with our policies and practices.
Well, I mean, I just the other day heard oh, what is his name? Burgess Owens? Is that his name? I think that's his name, right? Burgess Owens? Yeah, well, he was making the argument that if African American fathers stuck around and didn't abandon the women they got pregnant and the kids that those women have, that might actually do some good. Now, I don't think anyone would argue that anyone of any race is, defective in some way. I would never make that argument. However, we can look at cultural issues that exist, and the fact that African American fathers leave their families at a rate of like 80%, only 20% of African American fathers actually stick around to raise their kids and to marry the mother of their kids. That's going to lead to problems. That's going to cause problems. So why can't we work on that? If someone wants to focus on that, I think it would be a very worthy thing.
Or there's something such as racism. And I think when we break it down in that fashion, you have racial inequity.
Like, whose fault is it? Whose fault is it that African American men who get women pregnant don't support those women and don't support those children? Whose fault is that? Because I sure as shit isn't mine. I'm sorry. It's not mine. It's theirs. And by them, I mean the men who are getting the women pregnant and then abandoning them. It is their fault. They are not taking responsibility for their actions. Okay, well, what's going on in their families and how they're being raised to make them believe that that's okay? That's what needs to be looked at. You can't mandate that people do the right thing, man. You can't mandate it. All you can do is try to change culture.
There's a racist explanation, which is the group who has less because they are less. And then there's the anti-racist explanation, which is we're equals. So if a group has less, it's because of racism, which we need to eliminate. That it allows people to understand how and why racism not only exists, but the reason why people can't see its existence is because they view certain racial groups as equal, as inferior, which then normalizes.
So, Ibram X Kendi 3 days ago gave a corporate speech that said that if you don't see the world like him, that means that you're a racist. That racism is the only reason that you might not agree with Ibram X Kendi. Probably got paid $25,000 for this speech, at least.
The racial inequality that they see.
Yeah. So when I actually listened to your How to Be an Anti-Racist book, which I like that because it's your voice and there's something in that really helped me hear you differently. But the beauty of that book was that you kind of put it in your own racist views, if you will, right? As you were growing up, it sounded like you had some things that you grew to realize were wrong, were not the right assumptions, right? Do we all have a little bit of racist assumptions going on within us?
I can't necessarily say definitively that we all have them, but what I can say is that to at least to grow up in the United States is to grow up in a society where you're constantly being told directly and indirectly that certain racial groups are better or worse, that certain racial groups are problematic in a certain way. And you're constantly being told that people are to blame for their own uh, poverty, for their own mass incarceration, for being killed by the police, for being killed at higher rates from COVID-19. You're constantly being told and taught racist ideas. And so for me, I grew up in the 1990s. When I say grew up, I came of age, I should say, in the 1990s. And if there was ever a decade where Black teenagers, and I was a teenager in the 1990s, were told they were the problem, it was the 1990s. That was the decade in which, Black boys were called super predators. That's the decade where Black girls were constantly being vilified for having, quote, too many babies because apparently they wanted to get more welfare. That was the decade where this no excuses school movement sort of emerged because apparently a 9-year-old child can't, quote, make excuses, in school. That's when Black youth were constantly being sort of vilified. And so as a Black youngster, it was hard for me to not internalize some of those ideas that I was the problem, that Black youth were the problem, not racism. And so by the time I graduated high school, I believed that. I believed Black youth were the problem. And it really, I've spent the last 2 decades trying to unlearn those racist ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. And we see constantly that any group put in the same situation.
Just as an update, it looks like 78% of you think that Ibram Kendi is going to cry at some point in this conversation. He just looked like he was almost going to cry right there when he talked about the 2 decades that he spent unlearning the incredibly racist ideas that he learned in the 1990s, which I would question where exactly he learned those ideas in the 90s, because what I was seeing in the 90s were a lot of things saying, treat everyone the same, we're all equal, we're no different, treat everyone the same. That's what I grew up with. I'm gonna go with that. But 78% of you think that Kendi is going to cry at some point in this presentation. Let's see.
Situation kind of ends up with the same issues, right? It's kind of a human condition, not necessarily Black, brown, or whatever. So I appreciate that. And I think there's something really interesting and poignant about your being able to recognize that in yourself, because I think sometimes we say the word racist and people get so affronted by it, right? It's like, I'm not a racist. That's the first thing that comes out before you've really even had a chance to internalize that and think about it for a minute. And I think what you did for me, at least in your book, was kind of give yourself a chance to just recognize some of your racist beliefs that you may very well have. And so I appreciate that.
Guys, I just want you to take a moment and just recognize some of the racist beliefs that you yourself might hold, and maybe if you feel like sharing with the chat some of those racist beliefs that you hold, just to get them off your chest, you can go ahead and feel free to do that, because that's the healthy thing, is to just recognize that we're all just a little bit racist, and if you want to confess your inherent racism and unconscious bias in the chat, you go right ahead. Your pal, thank you for the super chat. I heard a lot of these complaints. Oddly, Joe Biden said a few of these. He did, didn't he? Joe Biden probably had his hand in a few of these things when he was working on that crime bill. You guys remember that? If you have not yet, please mount that like button.
So given that as racism, let's talk about anti-racism, because we talk a lot here at Ipsos about allyship. What does it mean to be an ally? And if you remember
Remember, we have their allyship checklist. We have their allyship checklist. In case you missed it, let me just bring it up again real quick. We have Ipsos's allyship checklist about what it means to be a good ally. So we're seeing things like, let's just go down. Good allies listen carefully, so they are more likely to understand the needs of people from marginalized groups. They accept leadership from people of color as well as from white people. Look at how inclusive they are in this one. They accept leadership from people of color as well as white people. Oh, thank you. Thank you for being inclusive. They work side by side with people of different races on tasks, projects, and actions. They readily accept, with no explanation or proof necessary, a person of color's Wow. Look at this one. A good ally in the land of Ipsos will readily accept, with no explanations or proof necessary, a person of color's position or perception. So, guys, in order to be a good ally in this presentation, we need to just accept everything that Ibram X Kendi is telling us. He's not required to present proof. He's not required to present explanation. We just need to just accept everything that Ibram X Kendi is telling us. Good allies can be present emotionally when individuals need to express feelings about racism. Good allies discuss race and racism with both whites and people of color. In those discussions, take people of color's perspectives seriously, but don't take white people's perspectives seriously. We only take people of color's perspectives seriously. Again, I will be making this entire document available to my locals community. And if you want to join my locals, there's a little ticker, kb.locals.com. I really appreciate it. That other Jenny says, something racist I internalized. Hard work and strategic thinking equals general success in life. God damn it, Jenny, you are such a racist. To think that hard work and being strategical will lead to success in life. I just can't believe you're bringing that type of racism into our community. Can't believe it. All right, let's keep going.
Framework I showed you, there's this whole bucket that's around, non-conscious or unconscious behaviors that people have. And in some ways, I feel like it's a bit of an excuse, right? I didn't mean it. That was not my intention. So therefore, it's not racist. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about, sort of the range of anti-racism to ally to, non-conscious stuff that just, kind of happens. I feel like they're three different things along a spectrum.
So I think to be anti-racist is first and foremost to express and really recognize that the racial groups are equals. And that doesn't mean that everyone looks the same. That doesn't mean that
Guys, congratulations. We're all anti-racist because we believe everyone is equal. Congratulations. We're all anti-racist. Guys, we made it. He's probably going to add like 15 more conditions onto it, but I feel good that we made the first one. We're all anti-racist now.
everyone practices the same culture. What that means is, even though two groups or two peoples may look differently, one, it doesn't look, quote, better or worse or more beautiful or ugly than the other. Just because two groups practice different cultures doesn't mean one culture is better, or worse than another. And also to recognize that despite people looking differently, we're all pretty much the same below our skins. Despite people practicing different cultures, every culture loves, but loves differently. So that's a human quality. So really recognizing the sameness of our sort of bodily or biological makeup, the sameness of our behaviors, and the difference, of our sort of aesthetic and cultural sort of makeup, and respecting that difference. And so in respecting that difference and recognizing different groups as equals, to be anti-racist is to then begin to see the inequality in our society as abnormal and not the result of something being wrong with a particular group. But I'm
Kendi doesn't understand what equality really means. And you know what? I mean, here is the thing, because you can be equal. Like, I don't think that anyone is any better or any worse than any other person, but that does not mean that everyone puts in the same effort. That does not mean that everyone has the same types of genius and brilliance. That does not mean that everyone shows up consistently. That doesn't mean that everyone does their homework at night. That does not mean that some people don't put more effort in than others. You can be equal from a practical level. You don't have to be better or worse than anyone else. I don't think anyone's better than me or inferior to me or any of you. I think we all start kind of like at the same place, but some people just work harder than others. Some people choose to make different decisions. Some people make better choices than others. We are the sum total of all of the choices that we make. So even though we are not inherently better or worse than each other, that doesn't mean that certain groups of people aren't going to make better choices. It doesn't mean that certain groups of people aren't going to work harder, and that's not a race thing, that's an individual thing. What Kendi wants is for everyone to end up in the same place without everyone having to all work the same. That's what he wants. Life doesn't work like that. What Kendi wants to do is completely eliminate he wants to completely eliminate individual free will. I have the free will to get up in the morning, to go to the gym, to eat right, to sit down, to work a good 8 to 10-hour day, to, go to sleep early, to do it all over again, to not drink too much, not do drugs, not do any of these other things that are bad. I have that choice. I also have the choice where I can sleep in, not go to the gym, where I can put in a half-assed effort. That's free will, man. Kendi wants to eliminate free will.
mentioning that process because that initial process of really truly recognizing the racial groups as equals is a long process. It took me like a long time, and it's still something that I'm struggling with.
Oh.
And
so Kendi doesn't recognize the different racial groups as equal? Is that what I just heard? I'm pretty sure he just said that he does not recognize the different racial groups as equal, and that means that this entire exercise, just like Robin DiAngelo, is him projecting his own perceptions onto everyone else. Let's just rewind a little bit, because I'm pretty sure that Ibram X Kendi just admitted he doesn't recognize the racial groups as equal.
recognizing the racial groups as equals is a long process. It took me like a long time, and it's still something that I'm struggling with.
Ibram X Kendi is still struggling with recognizing all the groups as equal. And we have hit on the crux of our problem, haven't we? because he doesn't recognize that Black people are equal to white people. He makes the assumption that all the rest of us are racist.
And a lot of that has to do with, to give people benefit of the doubt. Indeed, there are things that people are not conscious of. They're not conscious that, when they're clutching their purse because, a Black male is walking towards them on the street, that they are engaging in a racist act. And
he wants to rip the fruits of other people's work. That's right, George Andre Veloso Nunez. Who knows? Who knows? This guy's a millionaire with this shit, man. I'll tell you what.
But part of their lack of consciousness is because they haven't necessarily studied or come to understand what it means to be racist. If anything, they have been taught that act is an act of safety, not a racist act, right? And so I think there's so many different levels of consciousness that I think every individual needs to undergo.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I was talking to someone who was working on bias in AI and machine learning. And it was interesting to me because it was when we saw where the biases happened, it wasn't necessarily because anybody went in and said, I don't want Black people to be able to partake in this particular platform. The problem was that they didn't have any Black people at the table when they were creating some of these things. And therefore, they, didn't even know to ask the questions. They didn't know it would impact us in the way that it did. So it's this, it's kind of a circle, right? It's that systemic part, no diversity in the right levels that now has played out in the product that you've produced. And now you've got.
Did Ipsos just admit to creating racist AI? You probably shouldn't have put this on your YouTube channel, Ipsos. You literally just admitted to creating racist AI on the internet. Congratulations.
Bias that spits out of that consciously or unconsciously. So I think it was an interesting, description of what you just said. It's like we don't even know it anymore. It's so embedded in some of the things we do.
Yes, and if I could say very quickly, I mean, obviously, we don't know what we don't know, oftentimes. And many of us, we weren't necessarily raised to have humility to say, I don't know. Like, that's not something that is necessarily taught by our parents, that's taught in our schools, that it's actually a smart thing. It's an intelligent thing. It is a wise thing to recognize when we don't know. And the reason why, I mean, I'm not just sort of spewing that, the reason why it's wise to recognize when we don't know is because when you recognize it, then you can what? Go through the process of learning, right? But if you perceive that you know it all or know that thing when you really don't, and obviously the execution isn't going to be from a place of knowledge. But I think also we are not systematically taught about racism. We started last summer in a major concerted effort from schools. And
thank you, Emily. Emily says, hair is on point today, Dr. K. It's because I just got it cut. I just got the side shaved. It feels so good. It feels so much better. I appreciate the compliment. Shannon says, so much New Age content concentrates on consciousness. I wonder how much of it is tainted. No. Shannon, the way that New Age people use the term consciousness is not the same way they're using consciousness. Don't confuse the two. They are not. There, it is true that a lot of New Age people are woke, but it has nothing to do with that. They're two completely different things. Two completely different things.
Teachers and obviously, this summer and spring, there was a massive sort of effort to prevent or to stop us, from teaching children in a multiracial society that the cause of racial inequality is not what's wrong with them.
Ibram, you just admitted on the internet that you think that Black people are not equal to white people, and you wonder why parents might have an issue with you teaching their children about racism? You just literally said 3 minutes ago in this same talk that you yourself struggle with the idea that black people are equal to white people. Why are you in charge of teaching children about racism? That makes no sense.
A racial or teaching children in a multiracial society different sort of literatures and different traditions. To me, that should be no.
You're not teaching them different literature and different positions. You are grifting on the situation by releasing a children's book called Antiracist Baby. The fact that these people are taking advantage of children is the most disgusting part of this entire thing.
Should be a no-brainer, but it's obviously an uphill battle.
What makes it such an uphill battle? Why is that so hard, do you think?
So I think it's a combination of you have powerful people who are constantly looking for ways to energize and enrage their supporters, because that's really all they provide for their supporters is rage. They don't actually help them. They don't actually help them, advance.
Ibram Kendi wants to make the argument that the people who oppose him are only doing it to enrage their supporters. That's the pot calling the kettle black, Ibram.
In their life, provide more resources and opportunities for them. Their job really is to provide their constituents or the people who follow them, with rage. And then secondly, when one is not taught about a particular topic and you don't know what you don't know, it's hard for you to accept that and then say, well, my child, you should learn this.
Yeah.
And it's actually a problem that I don't know. And I don't want you to, for some parents, that's a no-brainer. I want my child to be better than me. I want my child to be more knowledgeable than me. I want my child to be able to interact with people of different racial and ethnic sort of and cultural groups in a diverse society, especially when they are young and it's even more diverse than some of the older generations. But you have other parents and teachers and caretakers who are like, no, I want my child to be just like me.
Literally, no one is saying that. That is not the argument that any of us are making. And again, I'm just going to remind you that less than 5 minutes ago in this video, you said that you don't see black people as equal to white people. That's your problem, Ibram. That's not our problem. That is your problem that you are trying to project onto all of us. Literally no one that is arguing against you is making the argument that you just made. You are not listening to people who have a different perspective than you do, and you are making shit up. And then companies like Ipsos are paying you $25,000 or possibly more to shill your nonsense to their employees. Ibram X Kendi just lied because he's either stupid or he's uninformed or he's willfully ignorant. Those are the only freaking options. George Andre Veloso Nunez says, we know how it is. If you don't have a counter argument, make it personal and project your behavior to others. That is exactly right. That's what these people do all day, every day.
Mm-hmm. Is that why you wrote Antiracist Baby?
Yes.
That was one of my later questions, but I figured I'd throw it in now. Yeah, I think it's important, right? That although I will tell you the research we've done even supports this, that Gen Zers coming up are the most diverse group that we've ever seen. They have, grown up with social media, so they've learned different ways of impacting policy and so forth. So I have hope. I have hope in them, if nothing else, that they will be able to see the world a little differently. And I think they'll be able to do some of the things you were just describing in terms of asking the right questions.
Like, why? Why? Like, I mean, maybe that's true, Jim, but like, why? Honestly, it wouldn't be fun. I'm going to say it. It wouldn't be fun. There'd be no reason.
So given that, I want to talk a little bit about this idea of the zero-sum game, because I think a lot of what happens is, even with, people with the right intentions, there is this thought that somehow if I help someone else do more, that I have to lose as a result of that. And I've heard you speak on this, but I'd really like for you to share with us, you know, how to make the pie bigger instead of there being this, set pie that we're all just keep trying to eat out of, if that makes sense.
Sure. So I think one area within those of us who have been writing and speaking about race and racism and racial justice that we haven't provided the level of specificity that we should have is that we should be connoting, and I should say, discussing the evidence that points to the fact that historically racist policies have disproportionately harmed people of color.
Okay, I want a specific example. How many people think in the chat that he is going to give a specific example? Hang on. I'll do another poll. I just learned I could do polls today. Will Kendi give a specific example? Yes, no. I love this. Polls are great. You guys have to tell me when there's new features, because I am stupid when it comes to technology. I'm dumb. Please help me. I'm old. I don't have technology privilege or something like that. I don't know.
But they've also harmed, let's say, white people. So the harm isn't as much, which is what makes this a racial issue, but it's harmed white people nonetheless. There's going to be white Americans who this fall or next fall are going to struggle to vote because of voter suppression policies.
What specific policy is going to prevent Black people from voting? Ibram, do you think that Black people are capable of going to the DMV and getting an ID? Do you have an ID, Ibram? Were you capable of going and procuring that ID? Then what racist policy is going to prevent Black people from voting? None. 91% of you think that he will not give a specific example.
That were implemented in their states that were primarily targeting, Black and Indigenous and Latinx voters, but it affected them, it harmed them.
How?
Right. There are going to be white people who are killed by the police. And there are more white Americans who are dying at the result of police violence in this country than any other major sort of Western, democracy. And so, but Black people are dying and Native folks are dying at 3 times the rate of white people. So the rate in which white people are dying of police violence is extremely high, and it's a huge problem. And if
the rate at which white people are dying from police violence is extremely high? I just went to get a haircut and I saw the police and they didn't kill me. Was I in danger? What is extremely high? What chance do I have of being killed by a police officer because I'm white? XYZ says his worldview is anti-mindfulness, anti-resilience, and nihilistic, teaching children there is a predetermined plateau to what we can ever achieve. That is exactly correct, XYZ. 100% right. 100%. And then George Andre Velasco Nunez says, you're part of the tech disadvantaged community. You should exchange. I do get victim points. I don't know how to use technology. I have no idea. I'm a total boomer. I am. It's true. Now, 92% of you say that Ibram X Kendi is not going to give a specific example. Let's find out. Other than apparently, white people can be killed by the cops. I'm totally going to clip that, one segment where Ibram X Kendi says that, white people are dying by cop at an extremely high rate. I'm totally going to clip it. It's going to happen.
We radically transform American policing, it would bring that number down, as well as the ghastly number of Black and Indigenous, people who are dying. I'm mentioning that because typically what we say is these anti-racist policies, these transformations we are going to make are really only going to help people of color. And so that causes some white folks to be like, well, this ain't going to help me. And indeed, it's going to hurt me. So therefore,
no, Ibram, I am actually in no fear at all of being killed by cops. I have zero fear. Zero fear of being killed by a police officer. So no, you did not convince me. You did not convince me to join your little grifter cult by saying white people are killed by police officers at extraordinarily high rates. You did not convince me at all.
therefore, I'm going to resist it. I mean, if you're, let's say, a white male, as and you're part of a unit, at a company or at an institution, and that unit is seeking to diversify, particularly bring in more women of color, some white men would see that as a threat. What they don't necessarily know is that more diverse units and teams are actually more efficient, more productive, and ultimately more profitable. And so they actually bring more resources to the institution, to the company, which then allows the employees, including that white male, to benefit from those resources through raises and bonuses and other sort of things. So,
well, that's true, Ibram, if you don't also destroy the company at the same time with bringing anti-racism into it, because anti-racism, like this presentation right here, actually destroys team psychological safety by pitting employee against employee. It destroys team psychological safety by enhancing call-out culture in organizations, which reduces the amount of internal trust. It reduces collaboration on teams, making it harder to work together, which all leads to direct counterproductivity on the bottom line. Organizations will make less money when they spend tens of thousands of dollars to hire keynote speakers like Ibram X Kendi if they then implement his ideas in their organization. It will absolutely impact their bottom line, which a lot of organizations are going to find out in the next couple of years. I've already had clients crawling back to me saying, Carlin, can we just do that training that we did before? And I'm like, maybe. Let's see how woke you are. George Andre Veloso Nunez says, I don't break the law, so I'm good. I mean, I didn't break the law and I still got interviewed by the FBI over January 6th, but I'm still not afraid. The other Jenny says, Kendi says white people are dying because of cops, but it's actually spelled heart disease. Thank you, the other Jenny, for that super chat.
So I think people don't really see and understand how the changes we want to make can actually help them. And part of that is because no one is saying that to them. No one is explaining.
Ibram, we just don't buy into your bullshit. It's not that we don't hear you. It's not that you're not including white people in your hypothesis. It's that we don't buy into your bullshit. That's what it is. We fundamentally reject your view of the world. I should be doing the okay symbol. We fundamentally reject your view of the world. Someone's going to fucking clip that. You know it. We just don't believe you. You have given us no specific examples that what you're saying is true. You have given no evidence that your strategies work. We just don't believe you. And we aren't all just white. Please give a thumbs up in the chat if you do not identify as white. I don't mean to exclude white people, I'm sorry, but please give a thumbs up in the chat if you agree with me and you are not white.
That to them. And part of that is also because they have been taught and we have been taught this zero-sum game that doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's super important, right? Because I do think it's hard for someone to give up something, right? And I struggle a lot with, because it's the right thing to do. Because honestly, I mean, I'm a very positive person, but if that's the only reason, I just don't have a lot of hope in where we're going here. So
Yeah.
I think that's really
Love,
important.
Laugh,
And
Live
I'd
says,
like to ask you,
I'm addicted to bullshit. Exactly. Love, Laugh, Live. Exactly.
Are there resources that we can look at or read? I've heard you do a couple of interviews where you've talked about this, but I'd love to, have our team have access to resources around things that explain that in more detail or give examples of when that happens.
So I would, especially if we're talking about white Americans sort of learning about how racism or racist systems or even racist ideology have harmed white people. I would recommend 3 books, off the top. One book that's currently on the long list for the National Book Award, The Sum of Us by Heather McGhee. Secondly, a book called Dying of Whiteness by Jonathan Metzl, who's a...
Dying of Whiteness. Really? I'm gonna have to read that book, aren't I? God damn it.
A scholar at, I believe, Vanderbilt. And just to give a quick example, one of the things that Jonathan documented in his book was how he sort of compared the effects of the removal of gun safety policies in different states, and tracked and recognized that in many cases the campaigns to remove these gun safety programs were directed towards white men to support them, to say that now you'll have the ability to easily buy guns, which will allow you to protect your family from those so-called Muslim terrorists, from those so-called Latinx invaders, from those so-called Black criminals.
So-called Muslim terrorists. Has anyone checked in with the Taliban lately? Has anyone checked in with what the Taliban's doing lately? So-called. Now, I don't think that all Muslims are members of the Taliban. I don't. I don't really particularly care most of the time. But so-called? Does Ibram X Kendi support the Taliban's control of Afghanistan? Did Ibram X Kendi support how Joe Biden withdrew from Afghanistan, creating a massive FUBAR that has cost us billions of dollars? The Latinx invade. Oh my God, Jesus Christ! I'm sorry, guys. We're slowly reaching the point with happy hour where all I'm gonna do is swear and be like, I'm gonna be like grumbly and like curmudgeon the entire time, because it's just like it's repetitive, right? It's like it's the same thing in every single goddamn training.
And what's actually happened is in those specific states, there's been a massive upsurge in the number of white men who are committing suicide by handgun. That is not happening in states that retain the gun safety sort of laws. Mm-hmm. So even though they were marketed to these white men as these will actually make you and your family safe, it has actually created all sorts of danger. And the level of white male suicide by handgun.
He is equating gun ownership with inclination to commit suicide? Hang on. I need to understand. I need to listen to this part again. I need to understand the argument that he's making. Hang on. I'm going to back up like a minute.
Who's a scholar at, I believe, Vanderbilt. And just to give a quick example, one of the things that Jonathan documented in his book was how he sort of compared the effects of the removal of gun safety policies in different states, and tracked and recognized that in many cases the campaigns to remove these gun safety programs were directed towards white men to support them, to say that now you'll have the ability to easily buy guns, which will allow you to protect your family from those so-called Muslim terrorists, from those so-called Latinx invaders, from those so-called Black criminals. And what's actually happened is in those specific states, there's been a massive upsurge in the number of white men who are committing suicide by handgun. That is not happening in states that retain the gun safety sort of laws. Mm-hmm. So even though they were marketed to these white men as these will actually make you and your family safe, it has actually created all sorts of danger. And the level of white male suicide by handgun currently is at a level of black male homicide. It's like an unspoken sort of crisis.
Gee, I wonder why that is. I wonder why that is. I wonder why white men specifically feel so demonized that they are committing suicide at a higher level. I wonder why that is, Ibram. Hang on, I saw a super chat. Dave123R says, not a super chat, but many anti-gun folks believe that guns have totemic powers that drive their owners to violence. Is that true? Is that legit? Wow. I mean, my husband just keeps buying guns now that the door has been opened to my husband buying guns. He just keeps buying guns. I should probably watch out. I don't know. Giorgio says, perhaps he is hiding the other books he has in order to look truly anti-racist. Maybe he is. Like, what books were on that bookshelf before this presentation? Common Cure says, we live in such a prosperous time, regardless of the pandemic, that the only way to attract people to a cause is to act like a small problem is a really big one, even if that means distorting the truth. Indeed. Indeed.
In our society, that is stemming from whiteness. And that's just one.
A society stemming from whiteness. George Andre Veloso Nunez says he's trying to fit the fact that white men are more prone to suicide with his narrative. Probably there are more guns owned by white men. I mean, I think that that's probably true, but it's also like, it's just a really weird argument to make, isn't it? It's like, why is he even bringing in the argument of we should have stricter gun control laws to protect white men from committing suicide? Okay.
Many chapters, in Jonathan's book, and then another book called Masterless Men, which sort of is a history of poor whites during the era of slavery in the South. And so we talk a lot about slaveholders, we talk a lot about obviously enslaved people, but there was another major group of people in the slaveholding South, and that was poor non-slaveholding whites who were largely, their poverty was the direct result, of the riches and the wealth of, slaveholders.
Yeah. So those are three great things, Janice. I know you're listening. We have an atlas that we try to keep resources in, so we will definitely add those. So thank you for that.
I have all their resources, by the way.
You mentioned a little bit about...
I literally have all their resource documentation. I'll be uploading it to my locals community. Make sure you join us if you haven't already. And mount that like button while we're on a quick pause.
How corporations actually do better, right? When they've got diversity in their decision making and at key points at the table. We deal a lot with companies now who are coming to us, asking for help in doing research around how to reach the Black consumer, how to be anti-racist. What do we as a corporation need to do? And what's interesting is, one of those projects that I worked on, the person described, at work, you almost have to learn how to be anti-racist. I can go home and be as racist as I want, but when I'm here, I've got to know what not to say, what to do, whatever.
Excuse me? So at Ipsos, the non-partisan polling company, they expect their employees to be anti-racist at all times, even if they go home and they can be as racist as they want to be at home, but you're expected to be anti-racist in the work environment? Really, Ipsos?
So this idea of actually being better for business, I think, is an important one, even as we talk to our client.
There is absolutely no proof, zero proof, that anti-racism leads to stronger business results. In fact, all of the evidence that we have says precisely the opposite, that this anti-racist bullshit in which you are pitting people against each other based on the color of their skin and encouraging employees to call each other out and hold each other accountable to being good little fucking allies. All of the research that we have says that that is completely counterproductive to businesses actually being successful. There is no research that says this is effective. There is a giant mountain of research that says this is grossly ineffective. So good market research, Ipsos. Good job. You're doing exactly the wrong thing. Congratulations.
Do you have any examples of corporations that you know that have really taken on an anti-racist agenda
Yes,
and
Ibram, tell us
that
this.
have seen
Yes.
results from doing that?
So I do know of some corporations, but I'm always hesitant to provide examples, largely because what I'm finding is the journey of every corporation is radically different,
Mm-hmm.
and if any corporation seeks to model its journey, its praxis based on what another company is doing, who potentially is likely in a different sector or is in the same sector but has a different sort of market or different market share or a different number of employees or different sort of makeup, it creates sort of.
So Ibram knows of examples, but he refuses to provide them, even when it's in a private corporate training. Because just remember, this training was not public until Ipsos made it public by putting it on their YouTube channel. But like, this was not public. So he's not even providing examples in private. Could that be because he doesn't know of any examples? Could that be because he's lying? And it's a really easy thing to cover your tracks to say, well, I know of tons of examples, but I just don't feel comfortable telling you in this private corporate training that you've probably paid me $25,000 or more for.
Problems. And I'm emphasizing that because I just think it's very, very important for every company to really think about its own makeup, its own culture, and to really think through, okay, what are the policies and practices and that need to change, that need to be made anti-racist, and then how can we as a company have a just and equitable impact on the community that we're trying to serve, and even the community that exists within our corporation. Like, that's what I think each corporation needs to be thinking about.
Yeah, that's fair. That's very fair. So from a company like us, like an Ipsos, and you don't have to give me details, but what kinds of things would you expect to see coming out of a research-based company whose mission is to, understand people, markets, and societies? Let's look at outcomes, right? What kind of an outcome would you see coming from Ipsos that would make you say, oh, okay, there you go. They've got it. They know what they're doing here.
Well, let me give an example, which I think is a study that actually Ipsos did. If I remember correctly, I believe it was earlier this year that Ipsos was involved in a survey that essentially sought to assess not only people's support or lack thereof for critical race theory, but in the actual survey, there was an assessment of their knowledge of critical race theory itself.
We asked the question 2 different ways and got very
Yes.
different answers.
And I'm mentioning that because I remember learning about, I think it was done with Reuters. I remember talking about that specific study, as soon as it was released, and it was released at a critical moment. And so to be able to engage in research, to really share facts that can affect sort of public opinion, that can affect how people are debating or considering or, a topic, is absolutely sort of critical. And so to really.
Kendi just said, let's just consider what he just said, because what he just said is actually a really big deal. He was asked by a market research company that is supposed to be non-partisan, how can we be a better anti-racist company? And he replied, well, you guys should be engaging in research that tells people the truth about critical race theory. I don't know what study they're referring to, but you can bet I'm going to be looking it up as soon as this stream is over. If someone wants to go find that study and DM it to me on Twitter or send it to me on my website, I would be greatly appreciative of your efforts.
Be thinking about that ahead of time, and to be thinking about that in real time, and to be doing more of those types of of studies. And if anything, it's hard to really say.
Why would Kendi want to encourage a nonpartisan market research company to do more of those studies unless he is positive of how they're going to frame the narrative around the outcome of those studies? I'm just saying.
What sort of led to a sort of a shift in the summer? It probably was the sort of the current debate over mask and vaccines, but there was a shift at a particular point.
As a reminder, vaccine mandates are a very specific example of systemic racism. Ibram Kendi refuses to acknowledge that vaccine mandates are a specific example of systemic racism, but they really are the only example that we really have right now, because African Americans are vaccinated at a much lower rate than white people, which makes vaccine passports and mandates specifically impactful in the African American community, which Dr. Ibram here refuses to acknowledge. George Andre Veloso Nunez says, the truth, trademarked, the same as the science, trademarked. Indeed it is.
Time, and it was not long after that study came out that it became harder for people to make the case that CRT was the problem. At the same time, they were refusing to define it, or refusing to define it accurately. And so to make those
we've all defined it on several occasions. My definition of critical race theory is that critical race theory is an ideology that started in academia in the 1970s that says that racism exists everywhere, in every person and everything, in every interaction. And the job of the critical race theorist is to suss out how, not if, how racism occurred in every single circumstance. James Lindsay has a slightly different definition. He says that critical race theory is the belief that racism is the fundamental organizing principle of society. We've defined them on numerous occasions, Ibram. Numerous occasions. Very clearly. Very succinctly. Just because you don't like the answer doesn't mean the answer hasn't been given.
Those types of, that's where research, can be so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in our ERG that we have here, we've got a pillar that's all about impact. And one of the things we're trying to do is to try to get that information out just in a better way, so that it is facts that we're dealing with, and not so much, words that set people off or don't encourage you to.
It's not so much facts we're dealing with, we're just dealing with words.
Dig a little deeper.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm going to ask you, this is a little silly question, but it's relevant. Okay, so on Big Brother this year.
Oh, God.
I don't know if you watched Big Brother.
I don't watch it, but I've watched it in the past. Yes.
Okay. I don't watch it either, but we had it on in the background and I heard some of the stuff going on. Anyway, I did get a question that someone said, okay, so there's never been a black winner of Big Brother.
Yes, there has.
Now there's 50% of them.
That's bullshit. That's bullshit. Josh won Big Brother. Josh was a jackass, but he won Big Brother. Josh is black. That is actual bullshit. There has absolutely been a black winner of Big Brother. Fun fact, I also coached a guy that was on Big Brother. He was on Big Brother like years ago, and then he was on Big Brother All-Stars like either last summer or the summer before. I coached him in his corporate job. He's actually a really good guy. But there actually has been a black winner of Big Brother, and his name was Josh. And he is currently on The Challenge on MTV, and he's definitely black. He did not deserve to win at all, but he did win Big Brother. That is a lie.
That are on there. They started the season with an alliance amongst the Black
Oh, for
contestants
fuck's sake. I'm
who
so glad I'm
said,
not watching Big Brother
doggone it,
this
there's
time.
going to be a Black winner of Big Brother this year.
Mhm.
And sure enough, they went through it, and they went through all of the different things you have to do on Big Brother. And so now it's the end of the season, and sure enough, there's 3 Black people. So there will be a Black winner of that. There
Mhm.
are people who have complained to me saying that that's reverse racism. How could they have gone in?
Reverse racism doesn't exist. It's just racism. Reverse racism is not a real thing. It is just racism. Racism includes everyone. Stop accepting the left's definition of racism. Just fundamentally reject it. Racism includes everyone.
In with that kind of an alliance, right? That was based not on merit, not on other people, but based on just the fact that they wanted a Black person to win. Now, I mention that not because, it's Big Brother and it's important.
How has everyone forgotten Josh? Josh was like 5 years ago maximum. Josh is absolute. Hang on a second. God fucking damn it. I swear to God. Josh, Big Brother. Hang on. Share screen. Window. This is Josh. He was on Big Brother 19. Josh won Big Brother. Does Josh look black to you? Because he sure as shit looks black to me. I was a Big Brother fucking super fan up until like 2 years ago, dude. Like, I know my Big Brother. Come on. I always thought I'd do awesome on Big Brother. My strategy, if I was ever on Big Brother, is I would definitely lie about being a psychologist. I would not tell anyone I'm a psychologist. I would have done great at Big Brother. Not so much the challenges, because I kind of suck at that kind of stuff, but like I would have done great. Josh is black. Don't tell me there hasn't been a black person who won. If Kamala Harris is black, then Josh sure as shit is black. I'm sorry. Jesus Christ.
But I do think there's something around this idea of reverse racism, and can that work? And is it fair when Black people do that? I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Sure. I mean, that's a great example because, let's say if the history of Big Brother is that there had been several Black winners, several white winners. Like there wasn't a situation in which there had never been a Black winner. And then the Black contestants formed this alliance and then made the case. So basically there was equity. So it started from a place of equality. It started from a place of equity. And then the Black contestants.
Is Ibram X Kendi defining equality and equity as the same? Because what he just said appears that he's defining equality and equity as the same. Spectacular said, Carlin, had you been my mom, I'm sure I would have gotten away with anything. Goddamn right. If I had a kid, they would hate me. I would be the biggest pain in the ass. I would be such a pain in the ass. I'd be like, I'm calling your bullshit. You haven't done your homework. Get the fuck upstairs right now and do your fucking homework. And yeah, I would swear. My kid would be swearing from a very early age. My kid would be one of those kids that would be swearing in the classroom because they think it's completely normal. And then they get reprimanded. They'd be like, Mom, I don't understand what I did was wrong. And be like, I'll explain it to you. We use those words in the house. We don't use them in public. Mommy only uses those words in public on the internet.
Decided that they were going to get together and ensure that a Black person won. That's a very different scenario than starting from a place of inequity, starting from a place of exclusion, starting from a scenario where there had never been a Black winner. And then the Black folks get together and try to break that ceiling, try to break down that wall, try to break down that white only sign. That's a completely different scenario. And so I think that in order for us to have an honest conversation about whether something is racist or anti-racist, we have to start with, is there equity or inequity to begin with? And then what is going to be the effect of the act? Is the act itself going to create more inequity or equity? And I think that's where some people just don't understand. They're focused on the process.
Mm-hmm.
So to give an example, they are equivalent to, I have a 5-year-old daughter. Her name is Imani. And, Imani is, she can speak up for what she wants and make a case for what she wants. And so I can imagine her playing with another sort of child her age. And, we go in and we give them each 2 cookies, and then we leave. And then we come back and I look over, and the other girl, the other girl, or I should say Imani, has 4 cookies. And then I could see me taking 2 of those cookies and giving it to the girl who has none, and Imani saying, "Why are you taking my cookies?"
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
Right? How dare you take my cookies? Or me not taking any cookies from her and giving the other girl 4 cookies, and Imani saying, "Well, what about my cookies? You're discriminating against me."
Yeah.
I can see my daughter saying that.
Yeah.
Right? But,
So he's raising, listen, here's what's going to happen with Ibram X Kendi. Here's what's going to happen. His chickens are going to come home to roost in about, he said his daughter's 5, in about 13 years, maybe even less, maybe even more like 11 years when she gets into high school. His chickens are going to come home to roost. Karma is a bitch. Karma is inescapable. Ibram X Kendi is going to get his with that child he's raising. Watch what happens.
it's a joke, but on another level, that's what people are doing when they're claiming that it's the same thing as if I was to go back, I gave them 2, they both had 2, and then I start giving, one girl more of the cookies and not giving. That's a completely different scenario. And unfortunately, people aren't admitting the inequity to start and the equity that is reached.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally get it. Thank you. Thank you for that. So I'm going to take some questions from the audience now.
Yes, let's take questions.
We have a few. Here's one. My wife and I are white. We adopted an African-American toddler when he was 1 year old. He's now 20 and is a successful young man. If you could go back in time, what advice would you give as we considered how to integrate his culture and heritage into ours?
I would say there's 2 things to consider. I would say first, when it comes to sort of learning culture for anyone, whether it's you or your 1-year-old Black boy, or it's immersion. So really, taking that child to, African-American cultural places and spaces and institutions so they can really be immersed, in the culture. As opposed to, watching on TV or doing sort of drive-bys. So to really integrate them, into the culture, into those spaces. And then secondly, it's, though you may see your child, your Black child, as the same despite having a different skin color, though you may treat that child in the same way you would another child that was white, society isn't treating them the same way.
Mm.
And
so do you remember how Ibram X Kendi said earlier in this presentation at around minute 18, in fact, that he still has trouble viewing African Americans as equal to white people. And now he's saying to parents who are asking, how do we integrate a 20-year-old, which is not possible at that point, but like whatever. Like now he's saying, You might try to treat them like they're equal, but they're really not equal. Isn't that interesting? Isn't it interesting that Ibram X Kendi earlier said that he himself has trouble seeing African Americans as equal to white people, and now he's telling a parent that you might think that your African American child is equal to everyone else, but society doesn't really see him that way. He's showing you his projection. He's illustrating it in real time. It's as clear as day if you look at the context. George Andre Veloso Nunez says, best pause ever. It is, isn't it, George? Guys, please mount that like button, subscribe on whatever platform you're watching on, whether you are on YouTube or Rockfin or Odyssey or Facebook. Please make sure you're subscribing, liking, all those things.
So as a parent of a Black child, whether you're a white parent or a Black parent or any sort of race, you have to prepare that child for racism. And so that's one of the things I'm trying to prepare my child for.
You have to prepare your child for racism? You have to prepare your child to convince your child that they're going to get treated unequally in the world. Excuse me? Oh, God damn it.
Is for her to realize that there's nothing wrong with you because of the color of your skin. And anytime someone says something like that, they are the problem, not you. And the reason why people have less is not because they are less. We have to actively teach our children that. And, that's what I'm.
So he says we have to actively teach our children that the reason that people have less is not that they are less. No, Ibram, the reason that people have less is partially, and I'm not going to say totally, because people start at different places in life. Some people start at more advantageous positions than others. However, if you work hard and you show up and you're consistent and you put your head down and you're smart and you study and you make sure you know your shit, you will get ahead in life. Your effort matters. It is not just about the color of your skin. Your effort, how you show up in the world, how you talk to other people, how you work with other people, how you treat people, how much you know, how much do you work hard or do you half-ass it every single day? Those things matter. Consistently showing up every single day will make more of a difference than your skin color ever could. Stop teaching people that they will not get ahead because of the color of their skin. You are setting them up for failure.
I'm encouraging all parents of children of color and Black children certainly to teach their children, but even parents of a white child to teach that white child that there's nothing special about you because of the color of your skin. There's something special about you when you're kind, when you're nice, but nothing because of the color of your skin. And people like you who look like you don't have more because they are more. That also has to be actively taught.
Yeah. Yeah.
The sad thing in all of this is that I actually genuinely believe that Ibram X Kendi feels like he's doing the right thing. I really do. I feel like he believes that he is doing the right thing. The problem is that it's less about him. He would be less problematic, to steal a word that the woke use. He would be significantly less problematic if institutions had not lifted him up. Common Cure says he literally called Amy Coney Barrett a colonizer for adopting a Black child. Well, he seems to change his point of view depending on the political party. But he would be significantly less problematic if so many organizations had not lifted him up. If my alma mater, Boston University, had not lifted him up, he would not have the platform that he does. If the MacArthur Foundation had not given him a Genius Award. Fun fact, Nick H says, think Ipsos people realize people will see Kendi's racist? I don't know, man. I don't know. Maybe. George Andre Veloso Nunez says, even people who start ahead, once they are left alone in the world and don't know how to manage it, lose everything. That's exactly right. If you win the lottery, but you don't know how to manage money, you will probably spend all of that money without even blinking. It's easy enough to do. So fun fact, I was actually supposed to before the pandemic, pre-pandemic, I was supposed to do training for the MacArthur Foundation. And I'm pretty glad I didn't now that they're clearly gone woke and have awarded freaking Ibram X Kendi $625,000 for a genius grant. It's so disappointing. I see so many organizations that I've worked with that have just gone completely woke, and it's like, I'm sorry, like, I wouldn't touch you with a 10-foot pole now. If you come to me and you're talking about pronouns, like, I'm sorry, I can't. I fucking can't. I wish Carlin would do diversity. And I don't want to, like, I'm doing very limited training right now. I'm doing individual coaching. I'm doing like one-on-one coaching. That's still happening, but like, I can't. I just can't. It's maddening. And it's not that I don't have the opportunity. Like, I have clients coming to me and I'm like, I'm so selective about places that I work with at this point. It's like, it's just crazy. And I mean, I want to really thank like all of you guys, because it's your support that allows me to be selective. Because if I had to go and work for woke training, like woke organizations, I would lose my mind. Where I'm at now is a completely different place than I was at, 2 years ago. Anyway, let's finish this up.
Another question. Can you, in your own words, describe the innate defensiveness whites have that the fear of being called racist trumps the desire to tackle racism?
I think the questioner said it the best. And unfortunately, there are, I think for those who are white, who are on the call, there are obviously many different things that particularly people of color really get frustrated with white folks about. This is probably at the top of the list. Coming across white folks who clearly and obviously are more angry about being called racist than the existence of racism itself. And so all they want is to go through life and never be described or identified as racist. And whether racism persists and continues to harm people.
Actually, Ibram, I want much more than going through life and not being called racist. I'm called racist every single day of the week. You get used to it. My desires in life go way beyond not being called racist every day.
Is irrelevant for them. And that's something that really, really bothers and frustrates people. And I think it's important for people to realize and really to even admit the times in which we're being racist. And one of the things I try to show in my work in How to Be an Anti-Racist is to be anti-racist is to admit the times that we are racist. Mm-hmm. To be racist is to constantly and consistently deny it.
Mm-hmm. Agree.
If you deny that you are a racist, that is simply proof that you're a racist. That's going to get clipped. I'm getting so many clips right now.
So the next question says, I'm thinking about what April said regarding being hopeful about Gen Z. What's your opinion on older generations being lost causes and set in their ways in terms of understanding racism and being supportive of the policy changes needed to be more anti-racist at all levels?
So I wouldn't necessarily say older generations are lost sort of causes. It is certainly harder. Like if you have thought one way, if you have functioned one way, if you've been one way for 70 years, it's extremely hard to begin to make changes or to even begin to see the world differently. It's much easier for somebody who's 15 years old, who's 22 years old, to make that shift. And so I just want, when I think it's important for older people to realize it is hard to unlearn.
Yeah.
Right. But if you're younger, you're learning. So you're not having to do the whole process of unlearning while learning at the same time. And I think that's part of the reason why, because of,
does anyone in the chat remember the movie Higher Education that came out in the 90s? Does anyone remember that movie? There's a guy, his name is Scott Stratton. He's known as Unmarketing. And he's actually really smart. I actually really enjoy like Scott Stratton's keynote speech. I've seen his keynote like several times, and he actually has unlearn tattooed, I think, like right here on his arm because of the movie Higher Education. It's a good movie if you want to go back and watch it. It came out in the 90s, but it's like, I kind of wonder what someone like Scott Stratton thinks now with the idea of unlearning, because what it meant in the movie Higher Education is completely fucking different than what Ibram X Kendi is saying. I definitely recommend you go watch that movie. It is actually a really good movie, but you like, again, it's the 90s. It was a completely different, I cannot even believe I sound so old. The 90s was a completely different time than right now. Albert, you just started playing bingo. I don't believe you got bingo. I don't believe you got it. You just started playing. I've been paying attention. The 90s did produce some solid films. What are your guys' favorite movies from the 90s? List them in the chat, please. What are your favorite movies from the 90s?
how difficult it is that, older folk are like, I'm straight.
I'm good. It's worked for me this far, right?
and then I think also when you're older, unfortunately, and I guess I'm older now too, in a way, we come to,
Yeah.
how can I put this?
So there is a cast member from Empire Records that comes to Walkaway stuff. What the fuck was his name? Oh my god. He's the guy that sang the song, the last big song. He comes to Walkaway stuff. Coyote Shivers, that's his name. Coyote Shivers comes to Walkaway stuff. He came to our Beverly Hills rally. I was like, oh my god. Yeah, Clerks. Clerks is a great movie. Forrest Gump is a good movie. Home Alone, Jurassic Park. I don't think I've ever actually seen Casino. Seven is a great movie. Oh my god, if you've never seen Seven. See, we have to talk about movies now, because movies moving forward from this point, all movies will suck. Moving forward from this point, we have to treasure and relish those movies that came before, and Seven is a great movie. Reservoir Dogs, yes. Office Space, yes. I've never actually seen Unforgiven. I don't like Westerns. Aladdin, Armageddon. I know someone who's in Armageddon. Armageddon's a great movie. Jurassic Park, The Crow. Holy shit. I was obsessed with The Crow. I had all sorts of Crow stuff. I had like the lunchbox. I had the action figures. I did. Oh my god. Dark City, yes! Dark City is a great movie. Oh my god, Shawshank Redemption. Shawshank Redemption is the best. Legends of the Fall, yes! I don't think Idiocracy was 90s, but Idiocracy is a great movie. Amistad, yes. Shawshank Redemption 2. Ever After, yes. Janice Neal's got a whole bunch. Aladdin, The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Lion King. Basically every Disney movie. Pump Up the Volume! Yes, Pump Up the Volume is an awesome movie. Oh my god, so many good movies. So many good movies. Yes, Rip Brandon Lee. Yeah, Idiocracy was 2006. I thought so. The Mask. So many good movies.
The way society is, we get used to it. So we get used to the injustice. And if you're younger, it is just, it's not something you had to deal with for 30 years. If anything, you can't imagine.
We do. We need to do another movie night. I know. I'm going to be so this weekend for my locals members, I'm going to be putting together the schedule of events this weekend. I need to actually just look at some stuff. I need to like pause and just look at some stuff. So I'm going to be putting together our next debate club, our book club. We're going to be doing a poll in locals to figure out what book we want to read, because I want you guys to vote on it this time. I've got some suggestions that came in from the Discord. So I'm going to be putting that together. And we'll get another movie night on the calendar for sure. And guys, if you want to join my locals and get in on the fun, I've got a little ticker, kb.locals.com. Come join us. It's the best.
Having to deal with this for 30, you want this to end now. And so that then leads to a certain level of urgency that, older folk who are just used to being in this horrible relationship with this.
Okay, someone has to teach me how to stream movies directly into the Discord. I have no idea how this works. Someone has to teach me. I have a tool that we can do movie night, but we can do it other ways as well.
With a nation or with a system or structure, would sort of used to. And if you're younger, you just got in that relationship. You're like, I'm out. I don't want to deal with this.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to say that because I do think older folks, we should give ourselves some level of grace in that it's harder to be a part of these movements. But I also think it's important for older people to know that there are elderly people who are in this fight. I've had people who'd come up to me, after talks, after reading one of my books or listening to I remember actually an older lady in particular, I believe I was giving a talk in Chicago, and she came up to me and said that, I realized, for the first time that, I've basically been racist most of my life, but I don't want to die that way. And I'm not gonna...
Bullshit. I don't believe this for one red second. Bullshit, Ibram. You're making stuff up. Do you guys believe that Ibram X Kendi was telling his true story just there? I do not. I'm not going to do a poll. We're almost at the end.
Wow, very powerful. So what are some actionable ways to counter these increasing anti-critical race theory protests and to show support for education about racism and anti-racism?
Is Ipsos saying that it supports critical race theory? Is Ipsos the non-partisan market research company saying that it actually supports critical race theory and it wants its employees to fight back against the anti-CRT protests? Is that what you're saying, Ipsos?
Racism in schools.
Run for school board. Support candidates that that are firmly about teaching truth and instituting policies that are for the well-being of our children. So run or support campaigns. If you can't literally join a campaign or run yourself, you may be able to help fund one. And so those campaigns are starting or happening, and so I would urge everyone, to support those school board members.
So listen, here is the deal with school board. School board does not decide curriculum except in Connecticut and Vermont. So in most cases, if you run for school board, you aren't going to have a thing to do with curriculum. But that doesn't mean we cede the playing field. It doesn't mean we cede the playing field. When you have Ibram X Kendi taking $25,000+ per speech to go around to corporations to tell them, you need to run for school board to fend off all these anti-CRT people, that means that we all need to be meeting them with that additional brute force to make sure they do not get their candidates onto school board. But that doesn't mean that school board is the end-all be-all. Unless you are in the state of Connecticut or you are in the state of Vermont, school board has no say over your curriculum. Okay? We all need to keep it in mind. It's not that you don't want to cede the playing field, but we also need to be realistic. In this case, what we want to say is you run for school board to keep people like this off of the goddamn school board. Yeah, that's right. They have say over superintendent. Well, all school boards have say over superintendents, but even if the superintendent gets fired, that doesn't mean the teachers in the classroom are going to change what they're teaching, right? So you can superintendents get fired like all the time, but that doesn't mean that teachers in the classroom change what they're teaching. If you really want to find out what the teachers are teaching, you need to do information requests for their emails. You need to do like a FOIA request or a right to know request or whatever it's called in your state, a public records request. You need to do a public records request for the emails. The emails that they're sending will tell you what they are teaching, okay? That's where people really should be focusing. People should be, you know what? Maybe we should do like a fund, because anytime you do a public information request, it costs money, right? Maybe we should do an activity in my locals where everyone does like information requests for their schools for the emails. And we figure out some keywords that we're looking for their emails, because this is public record. Teachers are government employees. So all of this is public record. Their emails are public record. Maybe we should start doing some public information requests, and then we do fundraisers to try to get information from select school districts. I don't know. I'm drunk talking out loud. I've had 2 beers, but I think it would be a good idea. Let's finish up.
If you can't run yourself, I mean, that's just so incredibly important. I think we've learned over the past year just how critically important and how powerful school board members are.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an involvement, right, that I think a lot of us have avoided or just didn't think was important, and now we see how critical it really is.
A FOIA
Can you speak
screen,
to the
yes.
white framing of survey questions? So how to tackle that, just like the bias that's gone into AI, that's embedded in how and what we survey and how those questions are asked?
Sure. So there's multiple levels to this. I think first and foremost, there like a question sort of stems from an experience or basic assumption. And so different groups may have different experiences and different sort of basic assumptions. And so to give an example, going back earlier, we talked about like the racist and anti-racist explanation.
Mhm.
That if your basic assumption is that a racial group is inferior, then you're not going to ask in a survey what policy could be leading to this inequity. You're going to ask in the survey, well, what behavior is leading, let's say, to this inequity? Now, that's an extreme example, but it's an example nonetheless of how a basic assumption then leads to a research or a survey question. And then there's culture, and lived experience, and people, the words that we use, the examples that are utilized are typically reflective of a particular culture. And so when you are asking a survey.
Okay, so interesting tidbit. Hang on, I'm gonna pull this up so you guys can see it. Hang on. You'll all be interested. I can keep the person who just sent it to me anonymous and still pull this up. Hang on. It just takes me a second. You guys are gonna be interested in this though, I promise. Okay, hang on. Okay. I'm just making it so the person who sent it to me is anonymous for obvious reasons. I don't want to get anyone in trouble. Oh shit. God fucking damn it. Okay. Hang on. So, a person who's watching right now just sent me the screenshot of Big Brother winners based on Google. And what's interesting about this list, what the hell? Hang on. Okay, got it. What is interesting about this list of Big Brother winners is that Josh isn't on it. Check this out. This person just Googled Big Brother winners. And what do you have? You have season 11, season 12, season 13, season 14, season 15, season 16, season 17, season 18. And then we have season 20 with Casey Clark, who's also a POC, by the way. Josh, who is the black person that won season 19 that Big Brother is denying is a thing, is conspicuously absent from the Google search results of Big Brother winners. Isn't that interesting? Isn't it interesting that on a season of Big Brother, where apparently they're talking about how a black person has never won Big Brother, that the only one that is missing is Josh, who is clearly black and who won Big Brother season 19. Isn't that interesting? I find that to be very interesting.
Survey question, you have to strip it of any cultural references, and you have to ensure that it can be legible to people of different cultures at the same level, which of course can be very difficult.
Right, that makes sense. So I think we have time for one last question. This one is about the idea of reverse racism, right?
Reverse racism doesn't
it's saying
exist.
that basically
lie.
there's an emerging school of thought that states that to be racist, one must be in a position of socioeconomic power to enforce that idea. So therefore, minorities can't be racist because they don't have the ability to enforce it on a mass scale. So in other words, Black people can't be racist because they don't have the power to be racist. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think there's also there's this emerging term that's called institutional power. So people are thinking about
He's deflecting.
Sort of power at
an
institution-wide basis. And then people are making the case that for instance, Black people do not predominate the US House of Representatives, or let's say the US Senate or the Supreme Court, then therefore all individual Black people thereby don't have power. And what I've been trying to get people to sort of understand is to distinguish between the group and an individual. And so when we're thinking about racism, we're thinking about something that's institutional and structural, and it involves groups. So if you have a collection of policies that are justified by a collection of ideas, there's a whole bunch of people. There's groups of people that are involved, in upholding the structure of racism. But when you talk about the term racist, that's an individualized term. So you're talking about an individual person, an individual policy, individual idea. So the question isn't whether Black people as a collective group have, quote, power. The question is, does that single Black individual have power? Those are two different questions. Does a Black cop have power? Does a Black CEO have power? Does a Black Supreme Court justice have power? Does a Black hiring manager have the power to say, I'm not going to hire that Black person because Black people are lazy? And so that's a different type of question. And so once we separate racism from, which is institutional, and racist, which is individual.
So they have convinced themselves that they can only look at racism as an institutional practice, which is of course why they ignore all these assholes in the white positivity movement, right? Because they're convinced that racism is no longer individual. We're just looking at it as an institutional practice. Okay, Ibram.
And we start asking the question, do individuals have power? Do individuals have the power to resist? Are some people not resisting because they think the problem, or they're Latinx people who think the problem are Latinx people and therefore are not resisting anti-Latinx racism or xenophobia? There are.
Why does he have a weird accent when he talks about Latinx people? I think that's kind of racist. Why does he have a why does he suddenly develop like a Spanish accent when he's talking about Latinx people? That seems a little racist. Does that seem a little racist to anyone else in the chat?
Are there indigenous people who do not challenge the structure of racism? Are there Black people who don't challenge the structure of racism? Are there Black people who are saying to white people, no, actually, Black people should not receive reparations. The slave owners should receive reparations. And they're saying that at the same time they're running for office in California with an attempt to get the white vote. Is that happening? Yes. So people are...
Oh, was he talking about Larry Elder just then? I want to rewind just a little bit, just a tiny, just a touch.
Anti-Latinx racism or xenophobia. There are. Are there indigenous people who do not challenge the structure of racism? Are there Black people who don't challenge the structure of racism? Are there Black people who are saying to white people, no, actually, Black people should not receive reparations. The slave owners should receive reparations. And they're saying that at the same time they're running for office in California
shit.
With an attempt to get the white vote. Is that happening? Yes. So people are expressing ideas that are harmful to Black people out of their own self-interest when it's going to harm Black people and help them only personally.
Yeah.
But again, when we look at it at an individual level, I would say that an individual Black person can indeed be racist.
Yeah.
Well, isn't it interesting, though, that he does admit that a Black person can be racist? But what he's talking about is Larry Elder. That's what he's talking about.
Well, Dr. Kendi, I think we are at the top of our hour.
Holy shit!
Am so excited.
Holy shit! He just wiped a tear. Holy shit! Hang on. Look at this again. Watch. He cried. He did.
People should not receive reparations. The slave owners should receive reparations. And they're saying that at the same time they're running for office in California with an attempt to get the white vote. Is that happening? Yes. So people are expressing ideas that are harmful to Black people out of their own self-interest when it's going to harm Black people and help them only personally.
Yeah.
But again, when we look at it at an individual level, I would say that an individual Black person can indeed be racist.
Yeah. Got it. Well, Dr. Kendi, I think we are at the top of our...
You said an individual Black person can be racist, and then he cried, and he wiped a tear. I didn't actually expect him to cry. I didn't. That was just a nice bonus. Holy shit. Holy shit. Wow. That made this entire thing worthwhile.
Our hour. I am so excited to have had you here with us. I think you've just imparted a whole lot of knowledge for us to go back and stew on for quite some time. But I do want to thank you once again for being here and for helping to educate us here at Ipsos.
You're welcome, April. Thank you so much for having me.
It's very nice to meet you.
All right. Take care.
So that's it. That is what Ipsos paid probably. I don't know exactly what they paid. I don't have his contract. But I know that Ibram X Kendi gets paid a good pretty penny for talks like that. $25,000 probably at least. Does anyone in the chat think that that was worth... Did you receive $25,000 worth of knowledge in the watching of this stream? Wow. Yeah, that other Jenny says, thank you so much for having me. Equals so glad your check cleared. All right, guys, that is all we have for happy hour on this particular occasion. Now, if you enjoyed this, please consider joining my locals community. I will be putting all of the documentation that I have from Ipsos up in my locals community so that you can review it at your leisure. That might not happen today because I've had like 3 beers. I know you guys will forgive me. Might happen tomorrow. It might happen tomorrow. It might. But I hope you enjoyed the stream. You can join my locals. You can join my locals community actually for free. kb.locals.com. It's on the ticker right below. Node 86 says join locals. It's the bomb. Like no toxicity. This is entirely true. There is no toxicity in my locals. It is not like Twitter. Twitter sucks. Twitter is a hellscape. It's not like my YouTube comments. I love you guys on YouTube. I do, but some of you are really toxic. Locals is the best. Join locals. You can join for free at kb.locals.com, but if you want to support the work I'm doing, then you can join at kb.locals.com/support as a monthly supporter at $5 a month, or you can become an annual supporter at $50 a year, or you can make a one-time gift. Now, we've got some exciting things coming up in locals. Like we have Elijah Blue coming to join us on October 12th for a private community chat in my locals. This is not going to be recorded. This is going to be a private chat. So she's going to be able to say whatever it is she wants to say. You're going to get to ask her questions. That's going to be coming up on October 12th. And then, of course, we have the voice of reason himself, Benjamin Boyce, coming to join us on October 28th. This is an exclusive just for my local supporters. You guys are going to love it. I'm so excited about it. I'm going to be bringing many more guests into my locals. I actually have a call with locals next week where we're going to be organizing interviews and things like that with different people that are on locals. So make sure you join us, kb.locals.com. That's all we have for right now, guys. Have a good rest of your week. I will be back streaming on Monday at 5 p.m. I will have a stream with Deb Philman of The Reason We Learn and Justice Graves, and we're going to be talking about how you need to approach your school about critical race theory. So that's going to be Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. That'll be the next stream on this channel. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you mount that like button if you haven't already. Subscribe on whatever platform you're watching on. We'll see you next week, guys. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you soon.